In 2010, I embarked on a daring solo move from New Orleans to Eugene, Oregon, with only my 2-year-old pitbull for company, armed with a basic flip phone and a hefty stack of printed MapQuest directions. I navigated unfamiliar roads with little technology and no cell service in vast stretches of desert. What began as an exciting adventure soon turned into a series of unsettling encounters across various road trips that deeply tested my instincts. These stories highlight the critical importance of trusting your gut and staying alert to the world around you while traveling. Back in 2010, I made the bold choice to move from New Orleans all the way to Eugene, Oregon. I was 24 then, just me and my 2-year-old pitbull packed into a rickety 14-foot U-Haul, carrying everything I owned. This was before smartphones existed, so I only had a basic flip phone with no GPS and a thick stack of printed MapQuest directions sitting next to me in the passenger seat. Navigating unfamiliar roads wasn't easy, especially since cell service completely disappeared in certain parts of the desert, making those stretches feel endless. Despite all that, I was excited and determined to complete this cross-country journey on my own terms. Somewhere deep in central Texas, though, I realized I'd made a serious miscalculation. My gas gauge was dangerously close to empty, and I hadn't seen another town exit or gas station for what felt like forever. Just as panic began to overtake me and I questioned my life choices, a tiny town appeared out of nowhere like a mirage. I didn't catch its name because I was so focused on reaching the pump before my truck sputtered to a halt. It was one of those blink and you'll miss it places. Maybe 6 streets total, barely any signs, and an eerie quietness that felt unnatural. I topped off the gas tank without even stepping into the building, confident I'd be back on the highway in no time. But why try to find my way out? Things quickly unraveled. I couldn't figure out how to get back to the highway. Not just getting turned around once or twice, but completely lost. I circled the entire town 4 times, each lap fueling my confusion and frustration. I could literally see the highway from certain spots, yet every road I took looped me back or dead-ended. Finally, I gave up and went inside the gas station to ask for help. That's when I met a lanky man behind the counter. His long, greasy black hair hung in front of his face, and he barely looked up from the magazine he was flipping through. He wasn't overtly creepy, but something about him fell off. He acted like I was wasting his time and gave directions that made no sense. He told me to take a road that would get me back to the highway. Only after driving 17 miles out of town, I paused and said, "Wait, how is it 17 miles back? I didn't even drive that far to get here." He just shrugged and mumbled something about the road curving around, all while avoiding my gaze. Leaving the store, my gut twisted into tight knots. My hand shook so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. Once inside the truck, tears just started streaming down my face. Nothing this guy said or did explicitly scream danger, but everything inside me knew something was wrong. Whether he wanted something from the back of my truck or something far worse, I had no intention of finding out. The problem was he was the only person I'd seen in that town, and I had no clue how else to get reliable directions. That's when a beat-up red pickup pulled up to the station. It looked like it had survived several apocalyptic events, but the man who stepped out was the living embodiment of a Texas stereotype. Big, broad flannel shirt, work boots, and a beard. Without hesitation, I ran up and asked if he could help me find the highway. Maybe it was the desperation in my eyes or the fact I was near tears, but he immediately gave me a warm smile and said he could help. He told me there was a tricky little turnoff just past a short concrete tunnel that I'd passed several times without even noticing. Apparently, it confused a lot of travelers because there were no proper signs and it blended perfectly into the landscape. Curious, I asked, "How far is it back to the highway?" He chuckled and said, "Oh, about a quarter mile. You can almost see it from here." My stomach dropped. I told him the directions the gas station clerk had given me, and his face instantly changed. He stared at me silently for a moment, then quietly asked how I even knew about that route. When I told him clerk's name, He fell silent again and asked if I had a proper map. Unfortunately, I only had my MapQuest printouts, which weren't much help in such a strange place. He went back to his truck and pulled out a weathered old map. Spreading it on the hood, tracing the route I'd been given, he showed me how it veered far away from town into the desert and basically ended nowhere. Just a scattering of trailers, rusted cars, and a rough group of families with known drug issues lived out there. Worse, he told me the gas station man lived in that area. I'll never forget the way Texas, that's what I call him in my head, looked at me as he said, "I've been smart to trust my instincts and avoid that road." To this day, I don't know exactly what the gas station guy wanted, but I have no doubt it wasn't good. I was a young woman alone with a truck full of belongings and no cell signal. It still gives me chills to think how easily things could have gone wrong. Instead, I got lucky. I met a kind stranger in a rusty truck with a warm heart who helped me find my way. I never learned his name, but I'll always remember him as Texas, my roadside angel in flannel. In 2010, during my cross-country move from New Orleans to Eugene, Oregon, I found myself lost in a strange, nearly deserted town in central Texas. My gas gauge was dangerously close to empty, and after what felt like an eternity without a gas station or any other exit, this tiny town appeared like a mirage. I pulled over to refuel, but was focused solely on getting gas, never even stepping inside the building at first. However, once I realized I couldn't find my way back to the highway despite circling the town multiple times, I braved going inside the gas station to ask for directions. Behind the counter was a lanky man with long, greasy black hair hanging in front of his face. He barely glanced up from a magazine he was reading and responded to me as if I was an inconvenience. His voice was flat, and the directions he gave were confusing, telling me to drive 17 miles out of town before I could get back to the highway, which made no sense since I'd only just arrived there. What unsettled me most was the way he avoided eye contact and seemed disinterested. Leaving the store, my instincts screamed that something was off. My hand shook so badly I struggled to insert the key into the ignition, and once I sat down, tears began to flow. There wasn't a single overtly threatening thing the clerk did, but every fiber of my being warned me to get away. I was alone in a town with a truck full of my belongings and no cell signal. The clerk was the only person I'd seen. Just as despair settled in, a battered red pickup truck pulled up to the station. The driver was every bit the Texas stereotype, bearded, clad in a flannel shirt and work boots. Desperate, I approached him and asked if he knew the way to the highway. Without hesitation, he gave me a warm smile and explained there was a hidden turnoff past a small concrete tunnel that many travelers missed due to poor signage blending into the landscape. When I mentioned the directions the gas station clerk had given me, the man's expression changed. He asked how I even knew about that road and pulled out an old weather map from his truck to show me the route the clerk had suggested. It veered deep into the desert and ended among rusty trailers and cars, a spot known for drug-related trouble. To my horror, he told me the gas station clerk lived out there. He gave me a knowing look and confirmed I had been smart to trust my intuition and not follow the clerk's directions. Though I never learned what the man's true intentions were, the story still sends chills down my spine. That day, my gut saved me. Amid the barren Texas landscape, a kind stranger in a rusty truck became my roadside guardian angel, guiding me safely back to the highway. I never caught his name, but in my mind I call him Texas, my flannel-clad savior. A few years ago, when I was about 20, one of my closest friends invited me to join his family on a laid-back road trip, ending with a concert just across the border. The plan was simple: drive during the day, camp at night in their camper van, enjoy good company and music, and take a break from the usual grind. Our first night, before crossing the border, we pulled into a small, cozy campground right next to a beach. It had that peaceful family vacation vibe. RVs lined up neatly, kids playing earlier in the day, and no one around who seemed out of place. Naturally, we all relaxed and let our guard down. After dinner, while everyone else was getting ready for bed, I stepped out to clear my head and enjoy the water. The camper was basically parked right by the shoreline, so a short walk sounded perfect. As I wandered down to the beach and past an old wooden shack, I took mental note of it as a landmark to help me find my way back. I kicked off my shoes and stood at the water's edge, letting the waves lap over my feet, zoning out under the moonlit sky. In the distance, I noticed a man standing further down the beach. Since it was a public spot, I didn't think much of him, probably another camper enjoying the quiet night. When I decided to head back, I realized the man was gone. But as I got closer to the shack again, I could have sworn I saw someone duck behind it, try not to be seen. My instincts immediately kicked in. I didn't panic, but I wanted to make sure whoever was there knew I wasn't alone or unaware. I called a friend who I knew would be awake and began talking loudly, dropping hints like, "Yeah, I see you. I'll meet you near the camper in 5. I carefully gave the shack a wide berth and walked back safely, locking the camper door behind me before climbing into bed and trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. At the time, I didn't mention a thing to my friend or his family. I figure it might have been nothing, maybe a drunk tourist or someone being strange, but harmless. So, I tried to put it out of my mind and enjoy the rest of the trip. About a year later, while hanging out with that friend and reminiscing about the trip, I mentioned a creepy moment by the beach. Suddenly, he went quiet and told me something I hadn't known. A few months after that night, his younger brother had woken up during the middle of the night to get some water. Passing by the camper's window, he saw a man standing right outside, staring in. The man bolted as soon as he realized he was caught, but it clearly freaked my friend's brother out. We sat silently, realizing just how much worse that night could have been. Whoever was hiding near that beach shack might have intended to follow me back to the camper. I don't know what he wanted, and honestly, I don't want to know. But that experience made me profoundly grateful I trusted my gut and kept my wits about me that night. It's a moment I think about more than I care to admit. A few summers ago, my boyfriend and I were driving home after a weekend camping trip deep in the backcountry of British Columbia. We were cruising along the long, bumpy forestry road, about an hour away from any paved highway. Since we were familiar with the area, encounters with people out there were rare, usually just other campers or logging truck drivers. The afternoon was perfect, clear skies, warm air, that golden summer glow. Suddenly, out of the trees ahead, a man appeared, waving frantically as if he needed immediate help. This caught both of us completely off guard. Seeing someone emerge from the woods without any vehicle nearby was unusual. As we slowed and stopped, my boyfriend rolled down the window to see what was wrong. The man looked out of place, wearing a thick flannel jacket despite the warm weather, dusty tan pants, worn boots, and sporting wild hair and large glasses. His pale, gaunt face resembled someone who belonged fixing fences, not suddenly stepping out of the woods like a ghost. He said his car battery had died and asked if we could game a jumpstart. The request sounded reasonable, but his slow, overly calm tone made it feel rehearsed, putting us on edge. Still, we wanted to help, especially out there where help is scarce. He mentioned his car was parked down a side trail overgrown with brush, and he started walking ahead while we followed in the truck, half joking about how this felt like the beginning of a horror movie. But beneath the humor, there was genuine unease. After about 150 meters, the path opened into a small clearing we wouldn't have seen otherwise. There, an old beige sedan sat parked with its hood up and trunk open, a blanket thrown over the back as if hiding something. The car looked fragile for those rough roads. My boyfriend got out to grab jumper cables while I stayed in the truck, staying alert in case anything went wrong. The man kept talking awkwardly to my boyfriend, mentioning some friend who had supposedly gone fishing with him but left earlier, details that didn't quite add up. He stood still, almost waiting for something. My boyfriend had to remind him to get in the car and turn the key, which he did. The engine started, but his intense tone didn't dissipate. He seemed desperately trying to appear normal, but something was off. Without putting the cables away properly, my boyfriend quickly got back in the truck, and I slammed the vehicle into reverse, backing out of there with branches scraping the sides. Once we reached the main road, I finally let out a breath. My boyfriend told me the man had stood silent and watched us the entire time we backed away. Maybe he was just a weird guy with a dead battery, or maybe not. There was no fishing gear in sight, and the whole situation felt too staged to be coincidence. Even now, thinking back, I get a knot in my stomach. We only made it out safe because we stayed sharp and didn't let our guard down. Sometimes, trusting your instincts truly saves you from danger. Back in the fall of 2020, during the peak of the pandemic chaos, my friend Jay and I set out on a nighttime road trip from New York to Michigan, aiming to handle some flooring jobs and maybe scout a few houses for flipping. Jay was driving his sturdy Ford F-150, and we left under the cover of darkness to avoid traffic and arrive by morning. As we wound our way through Pennsylvania's notoriously twisting mountain highways, especially along I-80 with its endless curves, narrow lanes, and steep drop-offs. I took the wheel while Jay tried to catch some sleep. Around midnight, I pulled into a service plaza to fill up and grab some snacks. The lot was nearly empty except for a reddish SUV parked a few pumps away, maybe a Suzuki or something similar. I barely gave a second thought, but about 30 minutes later, we were back on the highway, cruising at a solid 90 in the left lane when those same headlights appeared behind us again. At first, I shrugged it off, but as time passed, the SUV didn't overtake us, it just stayed right behind. I slowed down to around 70, expecting the SUV to pass. It had dropped speed to match mine. That's when I nudged Jay awake and said I thought we were being followed. As a former Army man, he instantly recognized the red flags. Jay instructed me to change lanes, and the SUV mirrored every move I made. Then he said, "Pull over, we'll see what he does." I eased onto the shoulder, and sure enough, the SUV stopped right behind us. Jay whispered, "That guy's a gun or something." His boldness was unnerving, that kind of audacity indicating nothing good. He told me to accelerate away, and as I hit the gas, Jay rummaged through the cab, grabbing whatever he could find: hatchet, machete, pocket knives, enough to defend ourselves if needed. Jay even suggested we brake check the SUV, hoping to force a crash, then confront the driver with blades drawn. But I wasn't ready to escalate unless absolutely necessary. Jay pulled out a large handheld spotlight from the truck bed and flipped it on, aiming it at the SUV to get a clear look at the driver. Tinted windows obscured the view at first, but after swerving lanes and hitting the spotlight from the side, we caught a glimpse for a few seconds. The driver was tall and hunched, with wild hair resembling Kramer from Seinfeld and a gaunt, intense face reminiscent of Uncle Fester from the Addams Family. His eyes locked onto us with a menacing focus. Realizing we were alert and no easy targets, the SUV made a sudden turn at the next truck stop and vanished into the night. Jay and I have argued ever since about what we should have done. He's convinced the man was a killer, a predator out hunting someone alone. I don't know his exact intentions, but I'm certain they were far from good, whether robbery or worse. I'm just grateful we didn't linger to find out. That night drilled home a vital lesson. Trusting your instincts can make all the difference on the road. Several years ago, two close friends and I decided to take an affordable Greyhound bus trip from New York to New Orleans, stopping at different cities along the way. With a tight budget, our plan was straightforward: ride the bus, stay in budget hotels, explore a bit, then move on to the next city. At first, it felt like an adventure, but things took a sinister turn when we reached Atlanta. We arrived in Atlanta around midnight. After checking our maps, we realized our hotel was only a few blocks from the station. We figured walking would be easy and didn't want to spend money on a cab. A classic mistake. Right near the station entrance, a driver offered us a ride, but something about him felt wrong, so we politely declined and set off on foot. Barely a minute into our walk through a rough neighborhood, a woman who looked strung out started following us. She spoke quickly, begging for money and offering a good time if we accompanied her. We tried to brush her off and quicken our pace, but the situation only got more uncomfortable. Then, 3 men wearing bandanas began trailing us silently, maintaining a steady distance. When we stopped to adjust our luggage, they stopped too. At that moment, anxiety tightened in my stomach. We were being stalked. Things escalated further as the woman returned, more aggressive than before. Luckily, a large bouncer from a nearby strip club noticed what was happening and shouted at her to back off. Another man, clearly familiar with her, got into a heated argument with the bouncer. The commotion drew attention, and a security officer from the bus station approached us. He admonished us for walking around at night in that area, warning how vulnerable we looked. He then escorted us back toward the station and firmly instructed us to take a cab instead. The troubling part was that the cab driver we had initially rejected was still waiting outside, and the officer directed him to drive us. As soon as we entered the car, a wave of unease rushed over us. The driver took an odd route, accelerated suddenly, and muttered to himself as if conversing with an unseen presence. He locked all the doors electronically, making us unsure whether we were being kidnapped or just in the company of an unstable person. We tried telling him several times that the hotel was in the opposite direction, but he ignored us. When we finally arrived, he stopped the car but remained silent and stared straight ahead, breathing heavily. Then, without meeting our eyes, he said in a calm yet unsettling tone, "Why didn't you get in the car earlier? Something wrong with the way I look?" It was clear he was angry about being turned down initially. We attempted to explain our hesitation. We thought the walk would be faster and were unfamiliar with the area. After paying the fare and giving a generous tip to avoid confrontation, we hurried inside the hotel. Before entering, I glanced back and saw the driver standing alone by his car, watching us with a cold, unblinking stare. No words, no movement, just that chilling look. Inside the hotel, things didn't improve. The place felt sketchy. We barricaded our door and barely slept, taking turns staying alert. The next morning, we checked out and switched hotels immediately, vowing that any future trips involving Atlanta or Greyhound would be off limits. Back in early 2016, I was 23 and living in a quiet little town in northern New Mexico. That weekend, I drove solo up to Boulder, Colorado, to visit a friend and unwind. The drive was familiar and scenic through desert landscapes, so the distance didn't worry me. On my way back, everything went smoothly until I stopped in Alamosa to fill gas. A last stop before entering a stretch of nearly 90 miles of nothing but dirt roads, scattered trailers, and vast high desert. It was just getting dark as I pulled out of the gas station when I noticed an older blue sedan pulling out behind me and staying uncomfortably close on the highway. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe they were in a hurry and would soon pass. But they didn't. When I adjusted my speed, so did they, almost perfectly matching mine. For a brief moment, I wondered if it was a police car monitoring me, so I pulled off at a small convenience store in Antonito, hoping they'd do the same. They did, parking right behind me, but no one got out. After a few silent minutes, I hit the road again, praying they'd lose interest, but they followed persistently as the highway grew darker and more deserted. Crossing back into New Mexico, my unease intensified. My phone was nearly useless out there, an older iPhone that only worked on Wi-Fi, and I found myself trapped, isolated in a region known for eerie tales, strange lights, disappearances, and more. I missed the turn onto the long dirt road home, but thankfully recalled a lit rest area nearby, usually frequented by few locals. I pulled in, hoping this might break the strange chase. They pulled in behind me again. Fear mixed with anger compelled me to confront whoever was behind us. I walked up to the driver's window as it rolled down and was thrown off. It was a middle-aged woman of average appearance. I asked why she followed me for nearly 90 miles. She gave a disconcerting excuse, claiming she thought I was her daughter. I stared at her incredulously. My car had out-of-state plates, bright, eye-catching bumper stickers, and bore no resemblance to anything her daughter would be driving. Didn't she call her daughter if she was concerned? Nothing about her story made sense. The more she spoke, the creepier it felt. I chewed her out and drove off, hoping that would end it. But as I turned onto the dirt road leading home, she followed. I slammed on the brakes, jumped out, and warned her it wasn't a public road and that getting lost out there at night was dangerous. She kept apologizing softly, but when I returned to my car and started driving, she continued tailing me. Close to home now, I just hoped my boyfriend would be there. As I pulled into the driveway, she did the same, then exited her vehicle and began walking toward the house, asking if she could stay the night because she was too tired to keep driving. I yelled at her to leave. Just then, my boyfriend appeared on the porch. The moment she saw him, she halted, turned, and bolted back to her car without another word. She drove away, never to be seen again. To this day, I have no idea what her true intentions were or someone else was lurking in the back seat. All I know is this woman followed me for nearly 90 miles along lonely, isolated roads, lied straight to my face, and only retreated when another adult showed up. Whatever she was up to, it certainly wasn't good. Back in April 2022, my friend and I were driving home to Kentucky after an incredible night in Columbus, Ohio, where we had just seen Matt Maltus perform live. About 20 or 30 minutes in the drive, we realized we hadn't eaten much and decided to pull off the highway at a random gas station for some snacks and a quick restroom break. Everything seemed normal. Grabbing chips and drinks, a quick bathroom stop, and then back into the car ready to just zone out and drive home. But then, when I glanced down at the GPS, I noticed it had suddenly rerouted us from a usual interstate onto a back highway neither of us recognized. Given that it was already around midnight and we were both exhausted, I didn't question it much. I assumed there might be traffic or an accident ahead and just wanted to get home faster. As we turned onto this new route, a creeping sense of unease started to settle in. There were no street lights, no cars, no businesses or houses, just endless open fields stretching out in all directions. The gas station we just left felt like the last hint of civilization. The road ahead looked like something straight out of a horror movie, completely deserted and unwelcoming. After driving for 5 or 6 miles through this eerie landscape, the GPS ordered a right turn onto a barely recognizable road. It had no painted lines or street signs, and a few scattered houses looked long abandoned. The vibes were undeniably disturbing. I joked to my friend, "This feels like somewhere you'd run into an SW," referencing a place notorious for danger. He quickly shot back, "Dude, don't even say that," laughing nervously, but it didn't really calm anyone down. Then the GPS warned us about an upcoming railroad crossing. We kept our eyes peeled, but when the track suddenly appeared right in front of us, a frozen feeling gripped us both. The crossing was silent. No flashing lights, no gates, no signs. We could barely make out rusty train cars covered in graffiti, sitting motionless as if abandoned for years. My friend softly said my name, "Try not to panic." But by then, the dread was unmistakable. It felt like we weren't supposed to be there, though we had slipped into some kind of liminal space outside reality. There was no way forward and no path to go around the tracks. Without hesitation, I slammed the car into reverse, spun through the grass, and four-pedaled back to the highway, racing at about 80 miles per hour until we reached the safety of the gas station we had stopped at earlier. We sat in silence for several minutes, trying to wrap our heads around what had just happened. Curious, we checked the GPS again, and, as if nothing had happened, it instantly rerouted us back to the interstate with no mention of the back road or the railroad crossing. It was as though the whole weird detour had been erased from existence. The train itself wasn't recently broken down. The wheels were corroded, and the entire structure looked like it had been rusting in that spot for years. So why on earth would the GPS send us down a dead end like that? The longer I think about it, the more unsettling it becomes. From the moment we left that gas station to the time we returned, everything felt surreal, like we were in some distorted version of reality or somewhere we weren't meant to be. It wasn't just a wrong turn or bad route. It felt fundamentally wrong. Maybe it was just late-night paranoia, or maybe something else was at play. But the dread I felt that night has stayed with me ever since. A chilling reminder that sometimes trusting your instincts means listening to the silence and the darkness along the road. These road trip experiences paint a vivid picture of the critical role intuition plays when navigating unfamiliar and sometimes unsettling environments. From getting lost in a deserted Texas town and being warned off a dangerous route, to sensing danger at a remote beach campsite, encountering a suspicious stranger in the woods, feeling the chill of being followed on a lonely highway, enduring threatening moments in rough urban areas, and even facing a baffling GPS detour that seemed out of this world. Each story underscores the importance of trusting one's instincts. They remind us that vigilance and awareness can be life-saving, as not all encounters on a road come with good intentions. Staying alert and listening to your inner voice can make all the difference between safety and harm when traveling. If these road trip encounters sparked your curiosity and reminded you of the power of trusting your instincts, don't hesitate to subscribe for more stories like this video. Leave a comment to share your own experiences, and spread the word by sharing it with friends who appreciate engaging and thought-provoking tales of travel and self-awareness.